My name is Rebecca Hayes, but everyone calls me Becca. I'm 32 years old and a single mom to my wonderful 6-year-old daughter, Lily. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that my own father would label me the family's stain at our annual Thanksgiving dinner, right before he screamed at me to get out and threw us into the bitter New England cold. The thing is, what he and the rest of my so-called family had no idea about was that they had been unknowingly living off my $25 million fortune for years. I simply replied, "Okay," and walked away with my dignity intact. Before I get into the full story of what happened that night, I'd love it if you let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if any part of my story hits home for you, please consider hitting that subscribe button, because what I did next set in motion a chain of events that would change everything for me and my little girl. To grow up in the Hayes family was to understand one thing above all else. Appearances were paramount. Our sprawling colonial home in a wealthy Boston suburb was always meticulously maintained, perpetually ready for a surprise drop-in from my father's colleagues or my mother's high society friends. My father, Arthur Hayes, was a high-level finance executive who viewed the world through a lens of profit margins and social hierarchies. My mother, Margaret, played her role as the perfect corporate wife to a T, always impeccably dressed, her social calendar full, and utterly obsessed with upholding our family's flawless public image. From a very young age, the lesson was drilled into me. Love and approval in our house were earned, not given. "Stand up straighter, Rebecca," my mother would hiss in my ear at charity galas. "You look sloppy when you slouch." My father's critiques were always more blunt. "Why can't you get straight A's like your brother? Daniel never gave us this kind of trouble." Or, "Your sister Charlotte was so much more graceful at your age." Daniel, 2 years my senior, was the golden child. He was the captain of the debate team, bound for Harvard, and seemingly incapable of doing any wrong. My older sister Charlotte, 4 years my senior, was the social butterfly. She married her college boyfriend Mark right after graduation and promptly delivered 2 perfectly spaced-out grandchildren, cementing her status. And then there was me. I was the perpetual odd one out. I was always more drawn to lines of code on a computer screen than to debutante balls, more captivated by the world of tech startups than the social climbing my parents held in such high regard. I did well enough in school, but I much preferred spending my weekends building rudimentary programs in my bedroom to attending the stuffy country club functions that were the cornerstone of my family's social life. Everything took a sharp turn during my senior year of college. I met a guy named Kevin in my Philosophy 101 class. He was handsome, ambitious, and for the very first time, I felt like someone saw me for who I was, not for who my family wanted me to be. We had a whirlwind romance that lasted about 6 months. Then I found out I was pregnant. When I told Kevin, he vanished, just like that. He blocked my number, dropped the classes we shared, and effectively evaporated from my life. I can still feel the dread of the phone call I made to my parents. The silence on the other end of the line after I told them stretched for what felt like an eternity. It was actually 32 seconds. I counted every single one as my heart hammered against my ribs. "You've always been determined to embarrass this family, haven't you?" My father's voice finally crackled through the phone. "Come home. We'll figure out how to deal with this situation." By deal with this, he meant one of 2 options: termination or adoption. When I made it absolutely clear that I was keeping my baby, the real punishment began. I was met with cold shoulders at family functions and subjected to endless pointed remarks about young women who throw their lives away. My mother started telling her friends that I was taking a leave of absence from school due to health issues. Against all odds, I managed to finish my degree by taking online courses, studying late into the night while my newborn daughter slept in a bassinet next to my desk. Those first few years were a brutal struggle. I rented a cramped studio apartment in a less than desirable part of town and scraped by on freelance coding gigs, juggling deadlines and diaper changes. My family offered the bare minimum of support, an occasional babysitting session, always accompanied by a long lecture about my poor life choices. But what my family didn't know, what no one knew, was that during those sleepless, caffeine-fueled nights, I was building something. An idea for a software startup that I had been developing since my sophomore year was starting to gain real momentum. By the time Lily celebrated her first birthday, I had managed to secure my first round of seed funding. By her third birthday, my company was acquired by a major tech firm for a sum that still makes my head spin: $25 million after taxes. But I kept my newfound wealth a complete secret. I moved us into a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, telling my family I'd landed a stable, full-time job in tech support. I continued to endure their condescension and judgment at every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering. I had this foolish hope that one day they would finally accept me and Lily for who we were, not for what was in my bank account. In the meantime, I quietly became their financial lifeline. When my father's investment portfolio took a massive hit during a market downturn, I anonymously covered their mortgage payments through a shell corporation I'd set up. When Daniel's supposedly brilliant business ideas needed an infusion of capital, mysterious angel investors would magically appear. When Charlotte and Mark needed to cover the exorbitant tuition for their children's exclusive private school, a series of generous scholarships materialized out of thin air. Through it all, Lily grew into a bright, funny, and deeply compassionate little girl, somehow untouched by the family's toxicity. She loved visiting her grandparents' grand house, completely oblivious to their backhanded compliments and the way they constantly compared her to Charlotte's properly raised children, Leo and Sophie. This past Thanksgiving, Lily was 6 and I was 32. I'd allowed myself to hope that time might have finally softened my family's harsh judgment. Lily had been vibrating with excitement for weeks, chattering nonstop about seeing her cousins and eating her grandmother's famous pumpkin pie. I talked myself into believing that this year would finally be different. This year, maybe, just maybe, they would finally see us, really see us, and accept us just as we were. I couldn't have been more devastatingly wrong. Thanksgiving morning broke crisp and cold. Lily was bouncing on my bed at the crack of dawn, her eyes shining. "Is it time to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house yet?" she chirped, her blonde curls a tangled mess from sleep. "Not just yet, sweetie," I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "We have plenty of time to get ready." I had spent weeks preparing for this day, determined to make it perfect. I had ordered a case of my father's favorite vintage Cabernet, spending more on those 12 bottles than my parents believed I earned in a month. I had bought thoughtful, expensive gifts for everyone. A bespoke leather briefcase for my father, a designer silk scarf for my mother, the latest educational tech toys for my nephew and niece. After we had breakfast, I called my mother to confirm our arrival time. Her voice was already strained. "We're serving dinner at 4 o'clock sharp, Rebecca. Your father hates it when people are late." "We'll be there by 2, Mom. Can I bring anything?" I asked. There was a pause. "Charlotte is handling all the side dishes. Her sweet potato casserole is just divine. You just focus on getting yourself and Lily here on time. And please, she added, make sure Lily is wearing something appropriate. That sequined dress she wore last Christmas was a bit loud. The sequined dress had been a beautiful, festive holiday dress that Lily had fallen in love with. I bit down on a sharp retort. We'll be properly dressed, Mom. See you soon. After hanging up, I took a deep, steadying breath. I dressed Lily in a brand new navy blue velvet dress with a simple white lace collar, conservative enough to pass my mother's inspection, but pretty enough that Lily still felt special. You look so beautiful, baby, I told her as I carefully braided her hair. You too, Mommy, she replied, gently touching the sleeve of my cashmere sweater dress. Will Uncle Dan be there? He promised he'd show me a new magic trick. Everyone will be there, I assured her, my stomach twisting into a familiar knot of anxiety. And we're going to have a wonderful time. The drive to my parents' home took about 45 minutes. It was the same stately colonial I grew up in, with its perfectly manicured lawns and a grand circular driveway. My father insisted that all cars be parked in a specific order of arrival, with his silver Lexus always taking the prime spot by the front steps. What none of them knew was that I had been making their mortgage payments for the past 4 years. The very house they took such immense pride in would have been seized by the bank long ago without my secret intervention. We pulled up at 1:45 p.m., a full 15 minutes early. Lily clutched the small gift bags she had for her grandparents as we walked to the door. I juggled the heavy case of wine and my own packages, taking a final deep breath before ringing the bell. My sister Charlotte answered, her perfect blonde bob swinging as she gave me a critical once-over. You're early, she said, her tone laced with annoyance. She then plastered on a fake smile for Lily. Hello, Lily. The children are in the playroom. Try not to get your dress dirty before we eat, okay? No hug, not even a warm hello. I felt Lily shrink back against my leg, her earlier excitement gone. Go on, sweetie, I nudged her gently. Go find Leo and Sophie. As Lily reluctantly shuffled off towards the playroom, Charlotte turned back to me. Mom's in the middle of setting the table, and Dad and Mark are watching the game with the kids. She meant her kids, of course. Leo, who was 9, and Sophie, who was 7, were apparently allowed to watch football with the adults, a privilege not extended to my 6-year-old. My brother Daniel emerged from the den, a glass of whiskey in his hand. At 34, he had our father's height and his authoritative air. Well, if it isn't the little sister, he said, giving me a quick, perfunctory side hug that was more of a pat on the back. Still plugging away at that tech support gig? Still going strong, I replied, with a tight smile, resisting the urge to mention that I was now the CEO of a company that employed nearly 100 people. Good for you, hanging in there, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, as if answering help desk calls was a significant step up from utter failure. Let me take that wine to Dad. As I headed towards the kitchen to find my mother, I heard my father's booming voice from the den. She's early, of course. Probably has nowhere better to be. Then, my mother's voice, quieter. Did you see that dress on the child? At least it's not another one of her gaudy outfits. I froze for a second, a familiar tightness gripping my chest. Then I squared my shoulders and kept walking. I would not let them ruin this day for Lily. I would smile, and I would get through this dinner just like I always did. In the kitchen, my mother was meticulously arranging cranberry sauce in a crystal serving dish. At 62, Margaret Hayes still had the figure and styled blonde hair of a woman 20 years younger. She glanced up as I entered. Rebecca, you're early. The same greeting, the same chilly tone. Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. I set down the gifts I was carrying and leaned in to kiss her cheek. She stiffened, barely tolerating the gesture. "Those go in the dining room," she said, nodding at the presents. "We're exchanging after dessert this year." Charlotte thought it would be more civilized. "Of course," I said, gathering them back up. "Can I help with anything in here?" "Charlotte and I have it all under control. Why don't you go check on Lily? Make sure she's not bothering Leo and Sophie while they play." I nodded and left, the familiar sting of disappointment settling deep in my stomach. Still, I told myself, the evening was young. Things could still turn around. I just had to stay positive for Lily. In the hallway, I overheard Charlotte and my father talking in hushed tones. "She's wearing a decent dress at least," Charlotte was saying, "though God only knows how she afforded it on that salary of hers." "Probably maxing out her credit cards again," my father grumbled. "Some people never learn financial discipline." I hurried past, my cheeks burning with the sheer irony of his words. The man whose home I was secretly saving from foreclosure was lecturing me about financial discipline. By the time I reached the playroom, I had forced my expression back into a neutral mask. I found Lily sitting by herself in a corner, quietly looking at a picture book, while her cousins were engrossed in a video game, pointedly ignoring her. "Hey, sweetie," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "Having fun?" Her small smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Leo said I'm too little to play their game." My heart ached for her, but I kept my tone upbeat. "Well, that's their loss. Why don't we go see if Grandma needs help in the kitchen? I bet she'd love for you to show her how you can fold the napkins into those fancy swan shapes you learned." As we walked back towards the kitchen, hand in hand, I made a silent vow to Lily. No matter what happened tonight, I would shield her from the full weight of our family's cruelty. She deserved to believe in the warmth and love that family is supposed to represent, even if the reality was a cold, painful imitation. At precisely 4 o'clock, my mother rang the small antique silver bell that had been a wedding present from her own mother. The clear, high-pitched sound echoed through the house, a summons for everyone to assemble in the dining room. Lily squeezed my hand as we found our places at the long, elaborately decorated table. The seating arrangement was, as always, a clear and deliberate statement. My father sat at the head of the table, with my mother at the opposite end. Daniel and Charlotte, along with their spouses and perfect children, occupied the prime seats in the middle. Lily and I were relegated to the very end, next to my mother, but as far from my father as physically possible, as if our perceived failures might be airborne. "Everyone take your assigned seats," my father announced, though no place cards were needed. We all knew our standing in the family hierarchy. Lily scrambled onto her chair, her little feet dangling high above the polished hardwood floor. No one had bothered to get a booster seat for her, even though one sat collecting dust in a closet from when Charlotte's kids were younger. "Rebecca, make sure Lily doesn't spill anything on the tablecloth," my mother cautioned. "It's antique Belgian lace." "She'll be careful," I replied, unfolding a napkin and placing it across Lily's lap. I offered my daughter an encouraging smile, which she returned with a flicker of uncertainty. My father stood to carve the turkey, his annual command performance. He wore a starched white shirt and a tie, even for a family dinner. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his posture impeccable for a man in his mid-60s. "Before we begin," he declared, holding his wine glass aloft, "I'd like to propose a toast to our family and to all of our many blessings this year." He then proceeded to tick off a list of each family member's recent accomplishments. To Daniel, whose investment firm landed the prestigious Westbrook account last month. To Charlotte, whose charity gala raised over $100,000 for the Children's Hospital. to Mark for making partner at his law firm, to Leo for winning the state soccer championship with his travel team, and to Sophie for receiving the Headmaster's Award for academic excellence. He paused, his eyes deliberately sweeping past Lily and me. And of course to Margaret, whose tireless efforts are the only reason these wonderful family gatherings are even possible. The omission was glaring, a deliberate silence that hung heavy in the air. Lily looked up at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What about us, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Charlotte's husband, Mark, let out a condescending chuckle. "Out of the mouths of babes," he drawled, making it clear he found her question impertinent rather than innocent. "Well," my father said, a tight, forced smile on his face, "I suppose we can acknowledge Rebecca's consistency in her current position. Persistence is a virtue, I suppose." He then turned to Lily. "And it's good to see you're doing well in, what is it, preschool?" "I'm in kindergarten, Grandpa," Lily corrected him politely. "My teacher says I'm already reading at a second-grade level." My mother replied non-committally. "Leo was reading at a third-grade level when he was your age, wasn't he, Charlotte?" And so it continued. Every attempt at conversation was a chance for them to circle back to the achievements of Daniel, Charlotte, or their children. When I mentioned that Lily had a real talent for drawing, Charlotte immediately whipped out her phone to show everyone photos of Sophie's pottery, which had been displayed in the school's front office. When I tried to talk about a fascinating documentary I'd watched, Daniel cut me off to pontificate about a financial journal that had quoted him in an article. The food was passed around, with the choicest cuts of turkey and the largest servings pointedly offered to everyone but me and Lily. As my father worked his way through his second glass of the expensive Cabernet I'd brought, his comments grew sharper. "So, Rebecca," he said during a lull, "have you given any more thought to finding a proper father figure for Lily? A child needs stability, you know." I set my fork down with deliberate care. Lily has plenty of stability. We have a wonderful home, a great routine, and more than enough love. "But not a man in the house," he pushed. "How is she supposed to learn about proper family values?" Before I could formulate a response, Charlotte jumped in. "Speaking of family values," she said, casting a meaningful look at her husband, "Mark and I have an announcement to make." All eyes swiveled to my sister, who placed a hand protectively on her still flat stomach. "We're expecting. Baby number 3 will be joining us next summer." The table erupted in a chorus of delighted exclamations. My mother literally clapped her hands with glee. My father stood up to propose yet another toast. Lily looked at me, her young face a mask of confusion, clearly sensing the vast difference between the reaction to Charlotte's news and the cold acknowledgement of our very presence. "That's wonderful news," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't begrudge my sister her happiness. "Congratulations, Charlotte, Mark." "Thank you," Charlotte said, barely glancing in my direction before turning to our mother. "We're thinking of converting the guest room into a nursery. I was hoping you could help me with the decor, Mom." "Of course, darling. Oh, this is just the most wonderful news. Another grandchild." My mother beamed, pointedly ignoring the fact that Lily was also her grandchild. As dessert was being served, Daniel cleared his throat. "Well, since we're all sharing good news, I have an announcement of my own. Henderson Financial has offered me a directorship. It comes with a significant salary bump and major stock options." Another round of gushing congratulations ensued. My father's eyes actually welled up with tears, a display of emotion I had never once seen him direct at any accomplishment of mine. "This calls for the good single malt," he declared, rising to fetch his prized bottle of scotch from the study. While he was gone, Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, can I tell everyone about my art prize at school?" "Of course, sweetie," I said, giving her an encouraging nod. Lily sat up a little straighter in her chair. "I won a blue ribbon for my painting at school," she announced proudly. "It's going to be in the Winter Art Festival." There was a brief, awkward silence before my mother said, "That's nice, dear. Now, Charlotte, tell me more about your nursery plans." Lily's face crumpled. I felt a hot surge of protective anger rise in my throat. "Actually," I said, my voice firmer than I'd intended, "Lily's achievement is quite a big deal. Only 3 students from the entire elementary school were chosen for the district showcase." "Well, not everyone can afford the art programs at a private school," Charlotte said with a dismissive little wave of her hand. "I'm sure the standards at the public school are different." "Lily attends Evergreen Preparatory," I corrected her, naming one of the most prestigious and expensive private schools in the state. What my family didn't know was that I sat on its board of trustees and had personally endowed a scholarship fund there. Evergreen. My mother looked genuinely shocked. "How on earth can you afford that on your salary?" "I manage my money carefully," I said simply. "Must be those child support payments from the runaway father," my father remarked as he returned with his scotch. "At least he's good for something." "Actually, Kevin has never paid a single penny in child support," I said, my voice tight. "Lily's education is entirely my responsibility, and I'm proud to be able to provide it for her." An uncomfortable silence descended upon the table, which was broken by my nephew Leo, reaching across the table to grab another cookie. In his haste, his elbow knocked against a crystal candy dish, sending it toppling directly toward Lily's lap. She flinched backward instinctively, and the heavy dish crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 tiny pieces. "Lily!" Charlotte shrieked. "Look what you did!" "It wasn't me," Lily said in a tiny voice. "Leo bumped it." "Don't you dare blame my son for your clumsiness," Charlotte snapped. I opened my mouth to defend her, but my father's voice sliced through the room like a shard of ice. "That was your grandmother's crystal, Rebecca. A family heirloom. This is precisely why we can't have nice things when your child is around." "Dad, Lily didn't," I began. "I saw what happened," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Your daughter jerked her arm and knocked it over, just like you. Always careless and always quick to blame someone else." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't," my mother said with a weary sigh. "But good intentions don't mend broken heirlooms, do they?" I felt something inside me snap. The carefully constructed wall I had maintained for years began to crumble as I watched my daughter, my bright, brave little girl, shrink into herself, accepting the blame for something she hadn't done. The shattered crystal on the floor seemed to break something in my father as well. He stood up abruptly, his face flushed with a combination of anger and too much scotch. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he boomed, his voice escalating with every word. "No discipline, no respect for family traditions or property." He pointed a trembling finger at Lily, who was now trying desperately not to cry. "This is what happens when children are raised in broken homes without proper values." "Dad," I said, my voice deliberately low and calm, "it was an accident, and it wasn't Lily's fault. Accidents happen in all kinds of families." He turned his full fury on me. "Don't you dare lecture me on family structures, Rebecca. You who couldn't even hold on to a relationship with your own child's father. You who got pregnant out of wedlock and then stubbornly refused to correct your mistake. Lily is not a mistake, I said, a dangerous, cold calm settling over me. Look at you, he went on, as if I hadn't spoken a word. 32 years old, no husband, no real career, living off God knows what in that shabby little house of yours, sending your child to a school you have no business affording, probably drowning in debt. You were always so irresponsible with money. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Dad, maybe this isn't the right time. No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around it, my father roared, cutting him off. I'm tired of putting on a performance at every family gathering. Your sister is a stain on this family, Daniel. She always has been, headstrong, rebellious, refusing to listen to reason. Arthur, my mother said weakly, but he waved her silent. Do you have any idea what my colleagues say? They ask about Daniel's firm, about Charlotte's charity work, and then they get this look of pity, when they remember I have another daughter, the single mother, the family embarrassment. Each word was a physical blow, but I held myself perfectly still, even as I felt Lily trembling beside me. And now, he continued, gesturing wildly at the broken crystal, she's raising her daughter to be just as careless, just as disrespectful. That's enough, I said quietly. Is it? He turned to face me, his eyes blazing. Is it enough, Rebecca? Because I've had enough. Enough of your sullen presence at our family functions. Enough of watching you raise that child with no proper guidance. Enough of the embarrassment you bring to the Hayes family name. Charlotte, seemingly emboldened by our father's tirade, decided to join in. You always thought you were so special, Becca. Always thought the rules didn't apply to you. Well, look where it got you. A dead-end job, no husband, struggling to give your daughter a fraction of what our children have. A proper home, my father picked up the thread. That's what a child needs. 2 parents, stability, values, not whatever it is you're providing in that little rental of yours. Lily was openly crying now, silent tears streaming down her pale cheeks. I wrapped my arm around her tiny shoulders and stood up. We're leaving, I announced calmly. Running away, just like you always do, my father sneered. Can't face the truth, can you? The truth, I said, my voice level, is that you have never once accepted me or my daughter for who we are, and I am done letting you make us feel small. My father's face contorted, turning a frightening shade of purple. You want to know who made you small, Rebecca? You did it to yourself, with your poor choices and your arrogant refusal to listen to those who know better. And now you're doing the exact same thing to your own daughter. Lily buried her face in my side, her small body racked with sobs. Get out, my father suddenly bellowed, slamming his fist on the dining table so hard the silverware jumped. Get out of my house, you ungrateful, disrespectful piece of trash, and take your ill-mannered child with you. A shocked silence fell over the room. Even Charlotte looked stunned by the sheer venom in his voice. Arthur, my mother whispered faintly, it's Thanksgiving. I don't care what day it is, he spat. I want her out of my house. The family stain. That's what you are, Rebecca. A stain on the Hayes name. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. My mother, pale and silent, refusing to meet my eye. Daniel, looking deeply uncomfortable but making no move to intervene. Charlotte, a strange mix of shock and smug satisfaction on her face. Her husband, Mark, was suddenly fascinated by the pattern on his dinner plate. Even the children were frozen, their eyes wide as they witnessed the ugly explosion of years of pent-up resentment. I took a deep breath, gathering my shattered dignity around me like a suit of armor. Okay, I said simply. I turned to Lily. Get your coat, sweetie. We're going home. But Mommy, she whispered, her voice choked with tears, what about Grandma's pie? There will be other pies, I promised her, my own heart breaking at her innocent question in the midst of such cruelty. That's right, run away, my father yelled at our backs as I led Lily out of the dining room. It's the only thing you're good at. I helped Lily into her small coat and gathered my purse and keys. My hands were surprisingly steady, a stark contrast to the hurricane of emotions raging inside me. As we reached the front door, I turned back to face them all. They had followed us into the foyer, a silent, staring tribunal. You know, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden stillness. For years, all I ever wanted was your approval, your acceptance. I wanted Lily to have the big, loving family I thought I grew up with. But now I see that was all an illusion. This isn't a family. It's a business, a hierarchy of judgment and conditional love. How dare you, my father began, but I held up a hand, and to my own surprise, he fell silent. Lily and I deserve better than this, I said. We deserve love that doesn't come with a list of terms and conditions. So thank you. Thank you for making that so painfully clear today. I opened the door and guided Lily out into the frigid November night. I could hear my father shouting something behind us, but the words were muffled by the closing door. They no longer had the power to hurt me. In the car, Lily's sobs finally broke free. Why does Grandpa hate us, Mommy? He doesn't hate us, sweetie, I said, my voice thick as I started the engine. He just doesn't understand us, and that's not our problem anymore. As we drove away from the house I had been secretly paying for, the house where I had just been called trash, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to stop enabling their cruelty. It was time for my family to face the consequences of their actions. I didn't drive back to our little house. Instead, I drove us to a luxury hotel in downtown Boston, a place my family thought I could never afford. I checked us into the presidential suite, ordered room service with every dessert on the menu, and let Lily watch cartoons on the giant television until she fell asleep in the enormous, fluffy bed. The next morning, while Lily was still sleeping, I sat on the balcony overlooking the city and made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. Mark, it's Becca. I need you to initiate the dissolution of the Hayes Legacy Trust and all associated shell corporations immediately. The Hayes Legacy Trust was the vehicle I'd used to funnel anonymous support to my family for years, paying my parents' mortgage, funding Daniel's business ventures, covering the tuition for Charlotte's children, and bankrolling her extravagant lifestyle. Becca, he said, his voice cautious, are you sure? This will have immediate and significant financial repercussions for them. I'm sure, I said firmly. It's time they learned what a real consequence feels like. After hanging up, I called my financial advisor. Michael, I'm pulling the plug. No more anonymous support, no more hiding. It's time for a little honesty. All right, he said. I'll start the process. They should start receiving default notices within the week. Thank you, Michael. As I ended the call, Lily stirred and sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Mommy, where are we? At a hotel, remember? We had our own private Thanksgiving party here last night. Her face clouded over as the memories of the previous evening came rushing back. Are we going home now? I sat on the edge of the bed and took her small hands in mine. Actually, I was thinking we could go on a new adventure. How would you feel about moving to our other house, the one by the beach we visited last summer in California? Her eyes widened in disbelief. The one with the big glass walls and the swimming pool that looks like it goes right into the ocean? That's the one. But what about my school and your work? There's a wonderful new school in San Diego that would be thrilled to have you, and I can work from anywhere. That's one of the perks of being the boss. She tilted her head, confused. You're the boss? I thought you just helped people with their computer problems. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. It was the first one I'd felt in a long time. I do help people with their computer problems, but I actually own the company. I'm the one in charge of all the helpers. Like a queen? She asked, her eyes bright with this new revelation. I laughed. Something like that. And you know what? I think it's about time everyone knew it. Over a lavish room service breakfast, I explained to Lily, in a way a 6-year-old could understand, that we were wealthy but had been keeping it a secret. I told her we were going to start a brand new life in San Diego, where we could just be ourselves without hiding any part of who we were. Will we ever see Grandma and Grandpa again? She asked, carefully spreading jam on a piece of toast. That's going to be up to them, I answered honestly. But first, they have to learn how to be kind to both of us. We checked out of the hotel and made a quick stop at our house to pack our essentials. Movers would handle the rest. By that evening, we were on a private jet, leaving the gray, cold Boston winter behind for the warm sunshine of Southern California. Our San Diego house was a modern masterpiece of glass and white stone, perched on a cliff with panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean. Lily ran from room to room, her squeals of delight echoing through the high-ceilinged space. She was mesmerized by the view from her new bedroom and the massive playroom I had secretly had designed for her months ago. "This is really our house?" she asked in awe. "Really and truly," I confirmed. "And from now on, we don't have to pretend it isn't." The first week in San Diego felt like a dream. We swam in the ocean, explored our new city, visited Lily's new school, and slowly, the weight of years of judgment and pretense began to lift. Then the phone calls started. The first was from Daniel, his voice tight with a panic I had never heard from him before. "Becca, something strange is going on. My angel investors, they just pulled out, all of them, on the same day. Did you hear anything about a market downturn I missed?" "No, I haven't," I said calmly. "But I'm sure a brilliant businessman like you must have contingency plans." The next day, it was Charlotte. Her voice was a whip-crack of fury. "Rebecca, did you know Leo and Sophie's school just called? They said their scholarships have been revoked in the middle of the school year. Something about the foundation that provided them being dissolved. It has to be some kind of clerical error." "How unfortunate," I replied, my voice cool as ice. "I hope you and Mark can figure something out." My mother called 3 days later, her voice trembling. "Rebecca, something awful has happened. We've received a foreclosure notice on the house. Your father is beside himself. He says it must be a mistake, that the bank is wrong, but they're insisting we haven't made a mortgage payment in months." "That sounds very stressful, Mom," I said. "Have you thought about calling a financial advisor?" "We can't afford a financial advisor right now, Rebecca. We might lose our home, the home you grew up in. Don't you even care?" "I care about a lot of things, Mom," I said quietly, "like how people treat my daughter." There was a long, telling silence on the other end of the line. Finally, exactly 1 week after Thanksgiving, came the call I had been waiting for. My father. His voice was stripped of its usual booming authority, almost unrecognizable in its raw desperation. "Rebecca," he said, without any preamble, "something's gone terribly wrong. The bank is foreclosing on the house. Daniel's business is about to collapse. Charlotte says the kids' tuition for the entire year suddenly came due all at once. It's as if someone is systematically trying to ruin this family. That does sound serious, I said, watching Lily sketch in her notepad on our sun-drenched terrace. Have you ever considered that maybe the financial foundation of your lives wasn't what you thought it was? What are you talking about? He demanded, a flash of his old temper returning. Dad, where did you think the money has been coming from for the past 4 years? After your portfolio tanked? After Daniel's first 3 startups failed? After Charlotte and Mark started living a lifestyle that far exceeded his salary? His voice went very quiet. What do you know about any of that? I know everything about it, I said, taking a deep breath, because I'm the one who's been paying for it all, for years. That's impossible. You work in tech support. I own Nexus Core, the company that acquired Innovatech for $25 million 3 years ago. I am the CEO and majority shareholder. The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the faint sound of his breathing over the phone. That's not possible, he finally whispered, but his voice had no conviction. The mortgage payments on your house have been coming from a trust called the Hayes Legacy Trust. I created it to support you and Mom after your finances collapsed. Daniel's angel investors, that was me. Charlotte's children's scholarships, that was my educational foundation. The family vacations, the new cars, the country club memberships. It was all me. Why? He choked out. Why would you hide all of this from us? Because I wanted you to accept me and Lily for who we are, not for what I could give you. I wanted a real family, not a business transaction. But I finally realized that was never going to happen. Rebecca, if what you're saying is true, you have to restart the payments immediately. Your mother and I are about to be homeless. Your brother's business is ruined. Your sister's children. My sister's children will be just fine attending public school, I said, the bitterness I had suppressed for years finally coloring my voice, just like the family stain and her daughter would have been. You called me trash, Dad. You threw your own granddaughter out into the cold on Thanksgiving. Actions have consequences. You can't do this to your own family, he protested. But the imperious tone that had controlled me for decades was gone, replaced by raw, naked fear. I'm not doing anything to you, I replied. I'm simply stopping doing things for you. There is a very big difference. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I apologize for what I said. I was upset about the crystal. This was never about the crystal, Dad. This is about a lifetime of conditional love and constant judgment. It's about teaching my daughter that she deserves to be treated with respect. It's about me finally being honest about who I am and what I've accomplished despite your relentless message that I was a failure. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he struggled to process this cataclysmic shift in our family's power dynamic. His voice, when he finally spoke again, was subdued in a way I had never heard before. Where are you? We need to talk about this in person. Lily and I have moved. We're in San Diego now. We're starting over, somewhere we can be ourselves without being judged. San Diego? You can't just take my granddaughter to California without a discussion. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that surprised even me. I think you lost your right to be part of that discussion when you called her an ill-mannered child and kicked her out of your house. The conversation ended soon after. My father was still reeling, his entire worldview upended. I knew it wouldn't be our last difficult conversation, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely and utterly in control. That evening, as Lily and I watched the sunset from our new home, she looked up at me with her serious, thoughtful eyes. Are Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Charlotte and Uncle Dan going to be okay? I stroked her hair. They're going to have to make some big changes, but yes, sweetie, they'll be okay. They just won't be living off our money anymore. Was that a secret? That we were giving them money? It was. But I don't think we need any more secrets between us, do you? She shook her head solemnly. No more secrets. Just us being us. Just us being us, I agreed, pulling her close as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving, the gentle heat of a California summer had settled over our new life. Lily finished her first semester at her new school with glowing reports and a wide circle of friends. Her confidence had blossomed in an environment free from constant comparison and criticism. I sat on our terrace, watching her build a sandcastle with some neighborhood kids, her laughter a constant, happy sound on the sea breeze. The change in her was a daily miracle. The hesitant, anxious child had been replaced by a vibrant, self-assured little girl. My own healing was more complicated. Undoing a lifetime of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it wasn't a quick process. But as I built a life based on authenticity, the old doubts and insecurities began to fade. I launched a new foundation through my company, one dedicated to providing grants and mentorship for single parents pursuing careers in technology. It was my way of turning my own pain into a source of empowerment for others. My relationships with my family began to slowly, cautiously evolve. My mother was the first to make a genuine effort. She started visiting monthly. On her last trip, she admitted, "I was so worried about what other people thought that I never stopped to ask what you actually wanted." It was a start. Daniel, after his business nearly collapsed, called me for advice, not a handout. We began to build a new relationship as peers, not competitors. Charlotte remained the most resistant, but even she eventually conceded that her children were thriving in their new public school, discovering talents they might never have found in their old, hyper-competitive environment. And then there was my father. His pride was a fortress, but a minor health scare in the spring served as a battering ram. Lying in a hospital bed, he finally confronted what truly mattered. "It's not the house or the club memberships," he told me when I flew out to see him. "It's family, but not the way I defined it, not as a measure of success." It wasn't a perfect apology, but from him it was a revolution. Now he and my mother were planning their first visit to San Diego. I prepared Lily, explaining that Grandpa was trying to learn how to be kinder. "People can change if they really want to, right?" she'd said, echoing a conversation we'd had months earlier. "I think he does," I'd agreed. Later that evening, after our new friends had gone home and Lily was tucked into bed, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my father. "Looking forward to seeing you and Lily next week. Been practicing my sandcastle building skills." It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't an apology for a lifetime of pain, but it was an acknowledgement. It was an effort, and for now, that was enough. I put my phone down and walked towards Lily's room, towards the sound of her voice, and towards the future we were building together, one authentic, honest moment at a time. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect your life or your choices? I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about personal growth and finding your own strength. And if you know someone who needs to hear the message that it's okay to stand up for yourself and your children, please share this video with them. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect, just as you are. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to demand it. Thank you for listening.